Good evening. My name's John Locke. I'm pastor here at St. James Lutheran Church. Our theme this year is brokenness. How do we see hopefulness in brokenness? Where are those glimmers of hope that we see and can recognize God's presence when there's brokenness all around us? Tonight we're thinking about the complications and brokenness of relationships, and how in the midst of relationships that are going awry, that are creating havoc for themselves and for one another and for other people, where's God? Where's the hope of the Spirit? Where's the hope and peace that comes from God's love for us? We'll begin tonight with a prayer. This prayer is from Augustine of Hippo, and we pray this prayer. O loving God, to turn away from you is to fall, to turn toward you is to rise, and to stand before you is to abide forever. Grant us, dear God, in all our duties, your help, in all our uncertainties, your guidance, and in all our dangers, your protection, and in all our sorrows, your peace. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Last week, if you happen to see last week's worship and participate, then you'll know this table. You may recognize it as being here. Now, it was different last week, piled with mounds of papers and different kind of problems and issues that bubbled up out of that paperwork. Tonight is a little different. Tonight, it looks cleaner. It looks like a place that you can sort of do some resting, maybe a little relaxation, maybe some pondering and meditation. You know, I told stories last week, and I probably gave some wrong impressions that perhaps you may have thought that all of the stories I told were about actual people in my life, and that I had a wife named Kaya, and that I had someone that was different names and such. I am using stories during Lent this year that are conglomerated between actual and experienced. Some may have my own family members or my personal story, or they may have stories of people that I've known, or situations I've been in, or things I've experienced. And so keep that in mind as we go through. Tonight's stories are meant to, they're meant to create in our own mind what it may look like, what it may sound like, but then really to picture in our own mind and heart where that story falls within our own stories. So, there we go. Now, one of the things that I enjoy in my house, we don't use a lot of wallpaper. We use pictures. We have a refrigerator, which I really believe if we took all the pictures off the refrigerator, the doors would fall apart. And I think probably the pictures are what's insulating the refrigerator anyway. So we have books of pictures of our grandchildren that their parents have lovingly developed and given to us, and they are awesome and wonderful. We have pictures in frames. I have some on the shelves back here. I've got a lot of pictures right here in this box. And when I look through these pictures and I dig in sometimes, and I see pictures and I see the faces and I recognize the smiles in the event, and it's an awesome type of thing, and there may be joy. There's pride in some of these pictures. There's adventures. There's times when we were missing somebody. There are times when particular children weren't around yet. And in each picture, when I really, really look deep, when I look deep, I see not only joy and thrills and pride, but I also see maybe there was hurt that led up to that moment. Maybe there was hurt that came about afterwards. There might be a scenario in some of our pictures where people who were part of that picture at that time are no longer part of our pictures today. That's called brokenness, isn't it? Relationships are hard. They're difficult, and we learn along the way how to maneuver and how to engage and how to participate in a relationship. We learn how to give and take in a relationship. And we learn that all relationships are a little bit different. There's one that gives me a memory. Our daughter, Tara, went to preschool when she was about 2.5. So by the time she's 4, she's at this preschool and she knows everything. All of the teachers, all of the places, everything is very comfortable. And when she was 4, she came home one day and she talked endlessly about someone named McKenna. We had never heard that name before. We didn't know if they just weren't friends the previous year or if maybe McKenna was new, the family moved in new or whatever. We didn't really know, but she and McKenna played together today. Tara and McKenna made mud pies today. Tara and McKenna took naps side by side today. Tara and McKenna read books to each other today. Every day. One day, however, she comes home and there's no mention of McKenna. That's strange. So her mom and I think about that, and let's don't get into that tonight. Let's assume that McKenna was sick. She wasn't there today. She'll be there tomorrow. And so we'll just play it by ear. And sure enough, the next day, McKenna did this. McKenna and I did that. McKenna and I. So things were back to normal. About a week later, no mention of McKenna. 3 days. This was not going to go well. I decided that the next day I would go to the preschool in the afternoon. I'll pick her up and I'll talk to teachers or somebody and find out what's going on. When I get there, that conversation doesn't happen because they're swamped by parents picking up everybody. And so I get Tara, we get in the car, and I'm strapping her into the seat, fasten the last buckle, and she suddenly bolts. Wants to get out of the car seat. She has to go say goodbye to McKenna. Hey, McKenna, bye, McKenna. Got to give you a fist bump, McKenna. Well, McKenna's getting in the car with her grandmother, and they're getting ready to drive off. And I said, Tara, we can't say goodbye. I'm sorry, honey. So we just have to let's pick it up in the morning and say good morning, right, when you get to school. And she said, okay. She was a little disappointed, but we were okay with it. So we get in the car, and we're getting ready to drive out of the parking lot. And I said, so that's McKenna, huh? You talk about McKenna all the time, and I'm just really great to have a face and know who McKenna is. You guys seem to be the best pals. You do all this stuff together. She's really, really fun, huh? Yeah, we had fun today. I said, fun today? Good. You did different things together today? She said, yeah, we were doing okay. We played good. She's my best friend. I said, really? Well, that's wonderful. So you guys hang out during the day in class and you do all these things together, right? Yeah, we hang out. We play a lot. We're really best friends. Sometimes we get mad, though. Sometimes we get mad at each other. Now I'm confused. Well, honey, do you really get mad at her? I mean, you get so mad at McKenna that you don't talk to her, you don't play with her, you just ignore her all day? Yeah, sometimes. And she does the same thing to me, though. Okay. This is happening at 4. I'm afraid to imagine what's going to happen at 13. I said, I tell you, Tara, I'm confused. I'm looking at her in the rearview mirror now, and she's looking up at me. And I said, honey, if you and McKenna are mad at each other, and when you're mad at each other like that and not talking to each other, are you still friends? Well, there's silence in the back seat. About 4 or 5 seconds goes by, and a little voice says, yeah, we're still best friends. I guess you can be mad sometimes and still be best friends. Out of the mouths of babes. That's been a couple years, and they're still very good friends. Oh man, yeah. I was looking at this earlier, and I said, yeah, I got to share this one for sure. Oh man, they don't make these things anymore. This is a college yearbook. Oh my. They don't make them because these are so heavy. This is filled with pictures of events and situations and people that you may never have been to or seen or knew, but it happened while you were at the school, so it's got to be in here. And there's let me see if I can find it. It's here somewhere. There we go. There we go. Xanadu West. So here's a picture of a group of guys, 2 guys. DJ, known by his family as Donald Jr., and Jason, known by his family as Jason. DJ and Jason, they arrived at this university to study business. They arrived at the same year, and they had a long, long history together. You know, they say that the statistic for a startup business lasting more than 2 years, the chances of it lasting and surviving more than 2 years is very low, 15, 18% or something, I think. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. But that wasn't the case with DJ and Jason. Their business is now fairly strong, been going 5 years now. But there's just something difficult going on. Now, they both desperately want to continue that trend forward. They do not want to become part of that statistic of how long a business can stay in existence before it ends. But today, that might be about the only thing that they agree upon. And this commonality is what has brought them to Dr. Bradshaw's office. Now, Dr. Bradshaw is the chairman of the business department at the university in the nearby city where they went to school. And when they arrived at the university, one of the best opportunities that ever happened to them is they got to do a course in their freshman year, an honors course with Dr. Bradshaw. She is a professor and an expert in managerial strategy, which is pretty advanced kind of stuff for freshmen. But these 2 guys went into that class, and they were just enthralled by what they were taught, what they heard, what they experienced. They met each other in that class. And not only did Dr. Bradshaw become their favorite instructor or professor in college, but they took every single course that she taught through their 4 years. So that just seemed to be a normal place to go. Let's call Dr. Bradshaw and see if she remembers us and see if she has time to see us and talk with us and help us through what we're going through. Well, unbeknownst to Jason and DJ, Dr. Bradshaw not only remembered these guys, but she had been following their careers. And she had known about their company. She advised them when they started it up right out of college. And she had been keeping track of how well they were doing, where they were operating, how far their products were spreading and things like that. So she had a pretty good feel for all of that. And she welcomed their invite to have conversation, just as a way to catch up. Well, she remembered when she had them in class for the first time, and how engaged they were, and how rapidly they became very close friends. I think they got involved in a project together through that class assignment, and so by the time they were juniors, they'd co-signed a signature thing on an apartment. They sublet a couple of rooms to other guys so they could pay their rent, and they were just really intuitive, really on things, helping one another. They got each other double dates. They played intramural sports together. They went camping together. They even did internship one summer at the same company, same location at the same time. Not easy to do. So Dr. Bradshaw was just very, very impressed with both of them, and she wasn't as surprised at all when they started a business. So when they come into her office, they sit down. It took her about 10 minutes of conversation to come to a very obvious conclusion from her vantage point, and that was there's something going on very deep, way below the surface of what they were talking about. Now, she knew it was going to take some serious work to get answers to the problems, but she was not one to give answers to her students. She was one to help guide and encourage and point different perspectives, different ideas to consider, and let the students come up with their own solution. That's the way it was then. That's the way it is now. And she didn't give many solutions and answers to DJ and Jason. But by the end of the day, it was pretty clear. There were several clear takeaways from this meeting. First of all, the business itself seemed to be pretty sound right now. The employees were stable and reliable, well-trained. Customers were loyal. Repeat business was a very high rate. They had made a profit from the very beginning. They were profitable, which is hard to say for most new startup businesses, and they were growing in sales dollars every single year. So those things in the business, all that looked positive. But she couldn't say the same for the friendship. Now, the friendship had changed somehow. Not what she had seen in the past. It seemed to her, though she didn't tell them this, that each partner knew that the other person had changed, and that their change was impacting the business. You follow? So DJ knew that Jason had changed, and how he had changed was impacting how they were operating the business, and vice versa. So you see, a couple years into the new business, DJ got married. That's one thing. And that was impacting the business because DJ now DJ liked Jason's new wife. DJ got married. Jason not only approved of, but he really liked DJ's new wife. But it was making time that used to be available for old friends, old traditions, old habits to be squeezed out. Now, on the other hand, Jason had begun taking a little creative interest in his off time and began traveling. And sometimes those travels and trips that he took created some, shall we say, some interesting relationships and some curious situations. And that was beginning to affect Jason's personality a little bit, his focus in the business. So these new life changes created some difficulties for the guys. The times in the early years when they were able to invest 50, 60, 70, even 80 or 90 hours a week in the business and eat and sleep on the floor of the office, those days were gone. And that was going to happen anyway, but now what was missing was that desire to work together to create and build and do and strive together toward a common goal. And there were some days apparently that they didn't speak to each other. Just not necessarily ignored each other, just never had any conversations. There were other times when they weren't even in the same building together. They weren't even there together. They just completely ignored one another and ignored their existence with each other. And then that created problems with employees. Sometimes the employees needed to know from DJ an answer to a question that they would normally ask Jason, but Jason wasn't anywhere around. So DJ would give an answer because it was needed, and then Jason would backtrack on it later on and say that wasn't the right thing to say or to do. It was a wrong decision. I was going to cover it. Everything's going to be okay. Well, those things created more and more tension. What Dr. Bradshaw was wanting them to see was to reflect upon how it was that they were each contributing to the pain of the other. They had their own pain that they thought they could control. But the pain that they were experiencing was a brokenness that was flooding over into the rest of the business with the employees and the customers and the other partner. For instance, Jason had always had this ability to engage people on a very personal level, on a very serious way, a very intentional and honest way. So he knew he knew every employee's name. He also knew their spouse's name. He could tell you how many children they had, what ages they were, whether they were in college or high school, whether they played sports or did piano lessons, or he could tell you if they had moved into the area recently or if they grew up there. He could tell you if they had grandparents living. He knew their birthdays. He knew their anniversary dates. He just kept all that information in his brain and in his heart, and it endeared him to the employees in such a way that his leadership skills with them was phenomenal. About 2 to 3 years ago, Jason had a traumatic situation in his family, and his dad died very suddenly, without warning. And it just threw Jason for a complete mental loop, emotional scenario, and something just never clicked again for Jason. It was like his internal wiring was sort of short-circuiting. And some days he was the old Jason and knew and cared about all the things, and other times of other days, it's like he was completely checked out. And you never knew. There was no clues as to which Jason you were going to encounter. Jason was involved in a new marriage, though. He didn't see the depth of the pain in his partner and his friend. He encouraged him to get over it. And it'll be okay soon. And we got business to run. And see, DJ wasn't spotless. I mean, this new marriage obviously takes a lot of energy, a lot of effort, and rightfully so. But man, when he met Cindy, he just shifted all attention to Cindy. She was his one and only. She was his reason for getting up in the morning and breathing. And it was helpful in a way. I mean, all of that devotion he had for her, all of that attention he was getting and giving, just increased all the energy. So when he got to work, he was zing, zing, zing all over the place, just ready to get stuff done. So on the one hand, it was sort of helpful, but when compared then definitely to DJ, there was like this all the time now. But one day, Jason called really early, like 5 in the morning and left a message on the answering device and said, "I won't be there today." That's all it was. When Jason got in and he heard about the message, he immediately texted, no response. He called, no response. He kept texting every 45 minutes to an hour or so, and eventually by late afternoon he was beside himself with worry. So he goes to Jason's house. When he gets to Jason's house, there's 2 cars in the driveway like there should have been, but the front door was open, unusual, and there were no lights on in the house that DJ could tell. So he decided to investigate, and he went into the house, and he heard their voices, and he followed them to the living room where Jason and Cindy were sitting on the sofa in the dark, holding hands with one another, and obviously they had been that way most all the afternoon and crying and seemed to be very distraught. When he got them to share, Jason said, "Well, Cindy's mom called last night and told us that the doctors had discovered that she had some type of rare blood cell disease, and that it was going to take everything that they had at their disposal to keep it under control, and that it was going to be debilitating for her at best, and probably would bring death at worst. And it would probably happen sooner than later." And that's where Jason stopped telling the story. But DJ wasn't satisfied. There just seemed to be something else, because he could see this distant look on Cindy's face, and she said, "That's not all, DJ. Mom told me that I have the same genetic situation, and that the likelihood of it happening to me in the next 3 years is about 80%. Neither one of those guys had talked to Dr. Bradshaw about those things. Neither one of them mentioned the emotional havoc going on in their own personal lives and what it was like to try to struggle and grow this infant business, a business where 30 or 40 people relied upon them for their income and their well-being, and hundreds of customers who relied upon their product. Never talked about these things. So DJ and Jason had some difficult decisions to make. Dr. Bradshaw had given them a couple of exercises to help, and they were geared toward helping them open up their own little carrying case of emotional baggage, of serious concerns, of things that make them tick or not tick, because their own brokenness was creating a brokenness between the friendship. And she wanted them to uncover that for themselves, at least at this point. Now, did they realize that the other person was hurting so much? Did they realize how much their focus on their own problem was hurting the other person because there was no room for support? They weren't able to be fully and wholly present for the other person. Did they realize that somewhere deep inside that they really resented the other person for not being there for them? Because they always had been before. Dr. Bradshaw's most deepest concern was the business could survive. They could bring in somebody, they could promote somebody to help do some management on the short term. They could find a buyer for the company, or there's other possibilities for the company. Because the real question was, can they survive the brokenness of their relationship? Is there hope? Is there a way to restore some of the positive energy that they gave for each other? Where's the Spirit work in those situations? I worry about people like Jason and DJ. I understand the pain. I know the hurt. I know the journey. Back to the pictures, though, huh? Oh, another. Yep, okay. Family pictures. You gotta love them. Particularly when your kids are teenagers and young adults. Because sometimes the pictures that you take today are made up of different people than the family picture you take today. That makes sense? Maybe I didn't say that right. The family picture you take today may not be the same family in 5 years. Because when relationships are involved, sometimes the relationships change. Let me share one last story with you. My daughter Carol went to, when she was a sophomore in high school, went to school the first day, came home. She didn't tell me, but Mom told me later. I think Carol's in love. I said, really? One day at high school and she's already in love? And, well, she saw this guy and she couldn't help it. That's the guy. Well, the second and third and fourth days went by, and that guy was not well liked in my home. Because Carol got really, really frustrated and really aggravated at this guy because he wouldn't pay any attention to her. He acted like she didn't exist. So she didn't even know his name. So I'm wondering about this love thing. Well, what she didn't know, and the truth came out, is that guy, his name's Barry, by the way, he recognized Carol and saw her on the first day as well. But Barry couldn't find the courage, couldn't get the wherewithal within himself to go and say hello to Carol. And it took him 3 to 4 days just to go and say hello and tell her his name and ask for her name. Carol was delighted, by the way. So Barry became part of our lives. For the next several years, he was there all the time. He came over to help mow the yard. He would come clean out the garage. He would show up for dinner, unannounced, uninvited. He was around all the time. Now, the best part about Barry, you got to understand, see, Carol had brought other people around, other guys, since she was in 7th grade. And some of them I knew wouldn't last and didn't need to last. Barry I liked. I mean, the other guys were okay. I liked them, but Barry, top of the list. I needed to find a way that helped that relationship. Barry was good for Carol. And the fact that I liked him and he seemed to be seemed like me, that didn't hurt either. Well, they were high school sweethearts. The next 2 years after the sophomore year went by like a blur. And when the time came to talk about college, there was a bump in the road. You see, Barry wanted to go to Coastal Carolina. Carol, for whatever reason, fell in love with gold and purple pirates and wanted to go to East Carolina. And there's quite a ride and a drive between those two campuses. And as freshmen, I wasn't going to let Carol drive back and forth. So they decided they would figure out a way to make it happen and make it work long distance. I don't know how hard they tried or how well they planned, but by middle of the spring of that first year, Barry had already decided that the following fall he was transferring to ECU. So they got to ECU together, and it just seemed to flow much smoother for them, and they were always together. You know, they just seemed to fit right together. It wouldn't have surprised her mom and I if they had come home for fall break or spring break one year or something and said, we've got an apartment together now. And I would have said, really? And they said, yeah, because we got married. That wouldn't have surprised me. I wouldn't have liked it, but it wouldn't have surprised me. Because everybody just seemed to figure, it was written in the stars. They would get married about 8 weeks after they graduated from college. Well, the summer before senior year was there, and they were both working and trying to save as much money as they could for school and whatever may come afterwards. And there was about a week and a half before they went back for fall classes. Carol comes home from work, and she is surprised to see Barry sitting on the porch steps because Barry told her that he had to work double shifts all week at the delivery company where he worked. Now, she was thankful and glad that he was there, just surprised. And then she hastens up the sidewalk to the porch. Barry gets up slowly off of the porch steps, and the greeting conversation was short, and it was very uncomfortable. And she asked how his day was, and I'm glad to see you, and I didn't expect to see you today. It's wonderful. And he said, Carol, listen, I've made a decision, and I'm not going back to ECU next week. I've decided to go to Western Michigan University because that's about 45 minutes from where my grandparents live, and it would be good for me to go and to be there, and it'd be good for them. And listen, Carol, listen, we've been great friends. You know, we get along really great. But I've decided this summer, I've come to the conclusion that I don't think I love you. I don't think it's good for us to keep on trying to be together. I think we need some space, and that's one of the reasons I need to go to Western Michigan. And I like you. Don't get me wrong. And your family's great, but it's just best if we do something different. And there's a box of stuff on the porch for you of things that you ought to have. And goodbye, Carol. Good luck. And with that, he turns and walks down the sidewalk, gets in his car, and drives away. Carol is stunned, absolutely emotionally paralyzed. She can't speak. She can't scream. She can't yell at him. She can't run after him. She can't cry. She's just standing there gazing down the driveway. About 7 or 8 minutes had gone by when her mom came out on the porch because she thought she had heard Barry's voice, and she was going to see if Barry could stay for dinner. But Barry wasn't there, and all she saw was this statuesque image of her daughter standing there in utter shock. And she didn't know what happened with Carol. She put her arm around her shoulder and said, Carol, are you okay? What happened? And Carol collapsed in her mom's arms and sobbed and cried and moaned and wailed and screamed. And her mom held her like only a mom can. At some point, Carol was calmed down enough, at least, that her mom was able to call me. And she said, hey, you need to get home right now. If at all possible, you need to come home right now. Something's happened between Barry and Carol. I don't know what it is exactly, but You got to be here. So I get home, and there they are sitting on the front porch, sobbing, rocking, moaning. And when it finally gets to a still moment, her mom looks up at me and whispers, "Barry's gone. Said he didn't love her, and he left, and he's going to some school in Michigan next week." And didn't give anything else. No other reason, no explanation. I didn't know what to do with that. I see my daughter in a heap on her mom's lap, and I want to try to fix it. I can't. Not in my toolbox. I want to go find Barry and punch him out. I want to find out why. I want to understand. I want to know that this guy is gone off his rocker somehow. But I can't. I try to do what her mom's doing and caress, speak softly, stroke her hair, give her kisses. Let her know that she is important, that she is valued, that she is loved, that she can and will survive. At least I say it. Then, sometime late that night, 4 o'clock in the morning maybe, a thought occurs to me, and it's about Barry. I no longer wanted to punch him in the face. But I liked the kid. He was part of the family. His departure not only broke her heart, it's breaking me too. And I wonder, is he as brokenhearted at the devastation in this relationship as she is? And I wonder why. And I ask. And God's not giving me an answer yet. Why? You see, pictures, memories, they work both ways, don't they? Relationships are hard, exceptionally difficult. We are sinful people. Our theology tells us that. And we can't help but hurt one another, no matter how hard we try. And sometimes we don't even know it. And more often than not, we don't realize that when we hurt somebody else in our relationship, that has a rippling effect. That it hurts others, parents, brothers and sisters, cousins. It hurts employees. It hurts neighbors. It hurts teachers. It hurts fellow students. Relationships are hard, and restoring broken relationships, we all know how incredibly difficult that can be. These
What do you think about when you look at me? I know we're not the fairy tale you dreamed we'd be. You wore the veil, you walked the aisle, you took my hand, and we dove into a mystery. How I wish we could go back to simpler times, before all our scars and all our secrets were in the light. Now on this hallowed ground we've drawn the battle lines, and will we make it through the night? It's gonna take much more than promises this time. Only God can change our minds. Maybe you and I were never meant to be complete. Could we just be broken together? If you can bring your shattered dreams and I'll bring mine, can healing still be spoken and save us? The only way we'll last forever is broken together. How it must have been so lonely by my side. We were building kingdoms and chasing dreams and left love behind. I'm praying God will help our broken hearts align, and we won't give up the fight. It's gonna take much more than promises this time. Only God can change our minds. Maybe you and I were never meant to be complete. Could we just be broken together? If you can bring your shattered dreams and I'll bring mine, can healing still be spoken and save us? The only way we'll last forever is broken together. Maybe you and I were never meant to be complete. Could we just be broken together? If you can bring your shattered dreams and I'll bring mine, can healing still be spoken and save us? The only way we'll last forever is broken together.
These stories bring tears to my eyes and hurt to my heart because they didn't actually happen to somebody that I know, but they did. They didn't happen to somebody that you know, but they did. They may even happen to you. And we want to know, when we're in the middle of this breaking of the relationship, is there hope? Is there hope I'll survive? And is there hope that somehow we can see that there's more good than bad in the relationship and somehow bond it back together? Is there a power that helps do that? I've always been told that God is present, that God will not leave me, that God will not forsake me, that God loves me and wants good things for me. And in the middle of a terribly broken relationship, I'm wondering about that. Where's the hope? Where's the glimmers of God's God's Spirit at work. Think about those things. Because God is present. Sometimes we can't see God as easily because of all of the fog of hurt, because of all of the haze of dissension and name-calling and arguing and the negative energies that are around us. We don't see God's hand upon our heart trying to soothe it, or God's hand on our shoulder trying to hold our burden, or God trying to grab our hand and pull us away from a dangerous or difficult situation. We don't always see all that. We don't see God at work around us with other people who see our hurt and try to help us, try to rebuild us or renew us or re-energize us or just hold us and soothe us. But I believe that's God at work. Now, sometimes God is present and God is working, and those decisions that God allows us to make say that the relationship can stay but not like it was. We can be friends, we can be acquaintances, we can work together to be parents, we can do those kind of things. The relationship will not be the same. And God says that's okay. That the love hasn't changed that God has for us and the other person. And sometimes there's also those things, just like in some biblical stories that I'll share in a moment, that we're able to work through. We're able to put a couple pieces back together, enough to hold things together long enough that we can pick up another piece a little later on and fasten it in. And then a little bit later, another piece. I've tried to repair some cups and bowls and stuff the last several years, and I've recognized very quickly I can't put all the pieces together at once. I have to put one piece in and make sure it's secure, because that's what's going to hold the next piece. And sometimes God works that way in our relationships. So rebuilding relationships also takes patience that God gives us. In the book of Genesis, we're told of a story of two brothers, Jacob and Esau. They have fought since they were wee little people in mom's womb. They have fought over everything. They have tried to turn their parents against each other, the other brothers, so that they might gain some advantage. To the point that Esau has been harmed by Jacob for the last time, and this time he will come back and he will kill his brother. His mother, Jacob's and Esau's mother, tells Jacob to pack up whatever you have your belongings, and leave. Leave mom, dad, leave what you know, and go away and run. Because if you don't, Esau will kill you. Jacob does leave. He develops his own life, gets his own scenarios going on. He marries and then has children and servants and livestock and all sorts of different things to create wealth, and has a huge family of his own. But he's still fearful that Esau will show up one day and seek vengeance. Jacob has a couple of encounters of his own that helps him see a different perspective of life, and says, I need to rebuild my relationship with my brother. I need to at least confront him and say, I'm sorry. They communicate through a third party so that Esau then comes to meet Jacob at a given location. And when Jacob goes to meet Esau, he sees coming with Esau is 400 soldiers. Jacob has come with wife and children and servants and livestock. He sends them away so they can be safe, and goes out by himself to meet encounter Esau and asks Esau, why did you come with this kind of force against me? Do you really want to kill me that badly? Esau says, no, I don't. But when we last met, this is the way you treated me, so I came out of protection. They began then to rebuild their relationship. They may not have been the best of brothers after that, but they were brothers. They may not have been the best of friends, but they became friendly. It took a long time, but they were continually working on reconciling their relationship and working toward restoring some kind of relationship and rebuilding what was broken so severely. A last story. In the Gospels, we're told the same story different ways by the authors, and this story is one where Jesus is walking along the road, and he and the disciples are walking along, and they're headed to their next location. When they get to the next location, and they're sitting around, and I sort of picture them having a little picnic, snack lunch thing, power lunch, and Jesus goes up to a group of them who had been hanging back in the journey, and he says, "Hey guys, I'm just curious, what were you talking about so intently back there on the road?" And they all hushed up really quickly. None of them admitted to really having any kind of serious conversation. And Jesus says, you really shouldn't argue about who's the greatest. And they knew they had been caught. That's what they were talking about, is which one of us is greatest among all 12 of us. And Jesus says, you come from different places. You come from different backgrounds. You have different experiences. You have different educational levels. You have different political views. You always don't like each other. And I didn't choose you because you would like each other all the time. I chose you because of the gifts you bring to the group and the group relationships. And there are going to be times when you don't like each other, and you need to learn how to deal with that. There are going to be times when you don't trust each other. There are going to be times when you leave the group for a while, but then you'll want to be welcomed back. There are times when you'll do something so grievous and so harmful that they'll want to kick you out of the group. You need to know how to do relationships. And there will come a point in time in the very near future when you will see me do things and say things that I'm going to tell you now that show you how much God loves you. And I will promise you that I will always be with you. I'll always be near and serving you and helping you and loving you. And I'll never, ever leave you. I won't forsake you. I want you to use that in your relationships. I want you to rely upon that to build your relationship closely, to trust one another, to help one another. And when you can't do that and the relationship breaks, for that to empower you to take a step and say, brother, I'm sorry in any way I've offended you. I'm sorry that our relationship is breaking. I don't want it to break. I want us to try to rebuild it. I want God to be in the middle of us, bringing us both together, making us stronger. Relationships are not an easy thing. Maybe the most difficult thing we ever encounter in our life. Growing, strong, faith-based, God-instilled, Jesus-empowered, Spirit-led relationships. It's hard. And it's maybe one of the leading ways our society is broken today. But there's still hope. Because the main relationship is ours and God's. God's relationship with us, that's what empowers us. That's what enables us to have relationships with one another. May this Lenten period of time allow us opportunities to look at the picture stories of our lives and gaze at the brokenness of people that we see there and reach out to them in love to help restore our relationship with them and help them restore relationships with one another. Wouldn't that be an amazing and awesome gift of discipleship in the Lent of 2022? Let's close with a prayer. Creating God, thank you for giving us spirits of love and compassion, joy and caring, and thank you that you bring people into our lives with whom we can share those gifts. Now we remember those people who are special in our lives. They give us strength, hope. They bring us courage. They offer understanding. They support us. They renew us, and so many different things. We would not be who we are without them, and we take a moment now to say thank you for them, to remember them in our minds and in our hearts, and yes, even on our lips. Sometimes, O healing God, even the best of us will be broken. And in that brokenness, we might hurt those around us. So forgive us, and give us the strength to ask for forgiveness and to seek reconciliation. We know it may not be like it was before, but we know that your presence in our lives will give our relationship that strength it needs to rebuild, to regrow, to have a different perspective, a different sense of hope, a different gift than it did before. We offer these prayers in the name of your Son, Jesus, the Christ, the one who was broken for our sake. Amen. Thanks for sharing this time together. I'm sorry you had to listen to my voice for so long. I hope the stories were insightful, meaningful, contemplative for you, and prayerful. Pray that God of all righteousness be with you this day and forever. Amen.